Do you guys know what a bunka is? A bunka is basically a cross between a Nakiri Santoku and a Gyotto. How you can actually look at it is that it is a slightly thicker Santoku plus a K-tip, and what you have between the two added together is a bunka. And the knife we're going to be looking at today is this 180mm bunka from kitchenKnives.ID. So quick disclaimer, I purchased this knife 100% with my own money. I don't have any affiliations with neither kitchenKnives.ID or any of the vendors mentioned in this video. And as always, this is a first impression video. We'll come back here in 6 months to see how this baby holds up. Now, this is my first bunka, and as you guys know, I am a big fan of Santokus, so I'm actually pretty stoked to try a bunka out for the first time and see how this compares to a Santoku. If you guys have not heard of kitchenKnives.ID before, kitchenKnives.ID is an Indonesian-based knife company that makes fairly budget-friendly Japanese-style knives. And if you guys are interested in trying to pick up one of these, I purchased directly from them, which I use and contact them through their IG handle, which I'll link down below. Or if you're within the United States and you're wanting to purchase one of these without having to wait for the shipping from Indonesia and all that mess, go ahead and check out 𝐂𝐀𝐀𝐍𝐄𝐋. It is one of my buddy's knife store. He also makes really beautiful knife handles as well as sayas. So go check out his work. If you want one of these, he has a few of them in stock that you can try to pick up. Now let's go ahead and quickly run through the specs of this knife. This is a 180mm bunka with a Nashiji finish, which is a very pretty finish. I've always wanted a knife in Nashiji finish, in a teak wood Y handle. The blade height right at the heel is about 51mm or 2 inches high, so there's plenty of room for knuckle clearance. The blade thickness right here at the spine is about 2.5mm thick. From their website, they said that this knife is made out of high carbon steel, but as we all know, saying things are made out of high carbon steel doesn't really tell anything. From my understanding is that kitchenKnives.ID actually upcycles both leaf springs and pipeline steel to create these knives. So they do have a similarity with the Daiwa knives where they upcycle steel to create these knives. But outside of that, I will have to say that the kitchenKnives.ID's fit and finish and just the overall aesthetic is definitely more my cup of tea. Now, with all that being said, this knife is heat treated to about 60 to 62 Rockwell hardness according to their website. Now, the next thing we want to take a look at is the fit and finish, blade profile, and the grind of the knife. Now, let's go ahead and start with the fit and finish. First off, let's go ahead and check for blade straightness. The blade itself is nice and straight. I'm noticing there's some very slight unevenness to the tapering of the grind, but nothing major. I'll show you guys here in a second. The Nashiji finish is very nice. If you don't know what a Nashiji finish is, it is kind of like a pear skin finish. But outside of the Nashiji finish, the rest of the face of the knife is polished to almost a mirror polish. It is, I wouldn't call it almost a mirror polish. It is very close, like a high polished satin finish would be I guess an accurate way to do it. But it is a very nicely done finish on the knife itself. The Y handle itself is very well made. It's very smooth. It doesn't have any rough spots. It's sanded very smooth, polished very smoothly. The only thing that I do notice is that there is a very, very slight gap that I'll change camera angles here so you can see. That there are some very slight gaps right here between the epoxy and the wood that can be easily fixed with, filling it with a little bit more epoxy. And it'll fix the issue, but being a first impression video and checking for fit and finish, this is definitely something I will have to point out. The spine and the choil are both already rounded and polished, so they're very comfortable in the hands. The next thing I want to look at is the blade profile itself. The blade profile is not as flat as a Nakiri or a Santoku. It has a much more pronounced belly. Well, not much more pronounced belly, but a more pronounced belly, so it allows for some rock cuts in there in comparison to your traditional Santoku or Nakiri. Now let's go ahead and talk about grind and taper real quick. The grind on the knife, like I mentioned about before, outside of the slightly bulging spots that are closer to the spine, the rest of the grind is actually fairly gradual and even all the way through. Now distal taper wise is a different story. Distal taper wise, the spine thickness all the way through is pretty much the same thickness. So distal taper wise, it's kind of non-existent for this knife. Now the next thing we want to take a look at is the balance point. The balance point of the knife is right here at the pinch grip, which is perfect. I like that a lot. So it creates a very balanced feel whenever you're using the knife. Outside of that, let's go ahead and move on to the cut test and see how this baby performs. Almost forgot to mention that all of the kitchenKnives.ID also come with this synthetic sheath slash saya that it comes with. So it's kind of nice to have something to protect your knife with. First thing we're going to do is go ahead and do a paper test real quick. See how sharp it is straight out of the box. As you can see, the knife came very sharp right out of the box. Oh yeah. User error. Sorry about that. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to see whether or not this guy passes a tomato test. Oops. Slices through with no problem, of course. It's trying to cut through, as you can see. Tomato test wise, didn't really pass with flying colors like I wanted it to, but it is what it is. Now let's go ahead and try for the grape test. Alright, so here's a grape. Let's see if it passes the grape test. Here we go. Guess the backhand works a little bit better, right? So far I've tested the tomato. Tomato didn't go as well. The grape test, it went just fine. And as I'm using this knife, and even though I'm keeping it clean and wiping it off, I can still see that the blade is starting to react with the acidity that's inside the tomato and the grape. So that is one thing that you do have to keep in mind while buying one of these knives, is that carbon blades do develop a patina and will react to foods that you cut into it. So if you're trying to keep a high gloss mirror polish like this, and you don't want to have to deal with a knife patinaing and developing some, I call it character, but you can call it whatever you want. If you don't want to deal with that, I would kind of suggest you guys to stay away from carbon steel blades and just stick with stainless steel knives. There's nothing wrong with that. Stainless steel, there are plenty of great stainless steel knives out there. So anyhow, next thing I'm going to do is test out the carrot cut test. As you guys know, I love using a carrot for a cut test. So the knife does cut fairly cleanly through, but I can feel just slightly it wedging through a little bit. It's not wedging through to the point where it's splitting the carrot by itself due to the wedging, but you can definitely feel a little bit of resistance from it. So in comparison to, let's say, a really thin santoku or maybe it's not a fair comparison to compare it to really thin Sentoku, that it definitely doesn't glide through as nicely. Push cut is going well. The knife is sharp, which is very nice. But as far as what I just did with the carrot, like I said, one of the reasons why I love using a carrot cut test is that it kind of gives you quite a bit of feedback on the grind and the profile of the knife, and it really kind of tells you quite a bit on what you need to know when it comes to testing out a knife. So that's why I really like the carrot cut test. Comfort wise, the knife is very comfortable in the hands. It's well balanced. Spine and choil, because they are slightly rounded, that it is also very comfortable in the hands, not causing any hot spots or any kind of discomfort in the hands. And the slightly pronounced belly also gives you the ability to rock cut a little bit. So that wrapped up the cut test, and as you guys can see, unfortunately the knife did not pass the tomato test. I don't know whether or not it is the tomatoes not being ripe enough or whatnot, but I'm not going to come up with a bunch of excuses. That's just how the knife performs straight out of the box. So it didn't pass the tomato test. After some testing and some trial and error, it passed the grape test. And like you saw just now, carrot test tells me that the knife is slightly on the thicker side, which I would have loved to see that this knife was on the more thinner side, because I like a thin blade, but that is a more personal preference thing. Some people don't like such a thin blade, and for something like a general purpose blade, I understand why it can be a little bit on the thicker side. I will try to put a new edge on this knife and sharpen it. I feel like there's maybe some slight burr left over on their sharpening side straight out of the box, but I don't know. I'm not going to come up with a bunch of excuses. This is just how the knife performs straight out of the box, okay? So if you guys are interested in getting a sharpening video or seeing me sharpen this knife and seeing how it performs afterwards, definitely let me know in the comments below. And this wraps up the video for this week. And if you guys like this video, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It will mean the world to me. It'll help me support all this madness. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.